Wonderful. In the meantime, I would be very grateful to tell you a little bit about our speakers we have today. We've put a lot of thought into who would be best to be on this panel in this session, and we're really excited for who will be presenting to you and the topics as well. So we'll start with Matt. Matt Shellick currently serves as the president of Delaware County Memorial Hospital at Crozer Keystone Health Network. He joins Crozer Keystone after serving as the chief executive officer of Roxborough Memorial Hospital. Matt spent 6 years at RMH from 2009 to 2015 in progressively accountable leadership roles leading up to chief operating officer. He then spent 2 years at Pottstown Memorial Medical Center as COO and Jennersville Regional Hospital as interim CEO. After an extensive search for RMH's new leadership, it became clear that the best choice was someone who knows the hospital and the community. Matt's background reveals a roster of clinical positions dating back to his days at Temple, Capital, Rehab Care, and Nazareth Hospital as an occupational therapist. It was at Nazareth that he started his career as a hospital administrator, putting his Temple MBA to work. From there, he escalated to chief operating officer at RMH and soon held responsibilities at Roxborough's sibling facility, Lower Bucks County in Bristol, PA. In addition to earning an MBA from Temple University, Matt earned a certificate in occupational therapy from Temple and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Millersville State University. He is a member of the Tri-County Healthcare Council and has been a volunteer coach for youth sports for many years. Matt is actively serving as a member of the Temple University College of Public Health Board of Visitors since he joined in 2017. Matt, we're so excited for you to be here today. Next, I'd love to introduce Mike Ossino, who is our Assistant Dean of Admissions, Enrollment Management, and Student Recruitment right here at the Temple College of Public Health. Michael Ossino serves as the Assistant Dean of Admissions, Enrollment Management, and Student Recruitment at the College of Public Health. And in this role, Michael oversees the development and execution of all strategy and tactics that support the recruitment and admission of talented future professionals, clinicians, and researchers to over 20 disciplines and over 50 academic programs in the college. Michael has nearly 15 years of experience in higher education marketing, recruitment, and admissions. He also serves as an adjunct assistant professor in the College of Liberal Arts at Temple University, where he has taught a variety of undergraduate courses since 2010. He also serves on the executive board of the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Michael holds a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Master of Liberal Arts from Temple University. He resides in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia with his fiancee, Kate. Thank you, Mike. And finally, Abby Shepard, who is our Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the College of Public Health. Abby Shepard serves as the Senior Associate Director for Admissions at the College of Public Health at Temple University. And in this capacity, she is responsible for developing and implementing full cycle recruitment, admissions, and enrollment strategies for all graduate level degrees and certificate programs within the college. In her previous higher education roles, Abby has worked within enrollment management, student and alumni affairs, international student recruitment and programming, and conference event planning. She has over 10 years of higher education experience. Abby holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Temple University and a master's degree in higher education from the University of Pennsylvania. So thank you very much all for being here today. We're so excited. And thanks for bearing with our minor tech issues that we've had today as well. So without further ado, I'm really pleased, Matt, for you to give us sort of a little bit about your background and why you've chosen the education that you have over the years and really how it's impacted your career. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, and thank you. I'd like to thank the College
You're muted, I'm sorry.
Health. Oh, I'm off mute. Can't hear me?
Can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Can hear.
Everybody else can.
Perfect. Okay.
Just you, Samantha.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thank you,
so,
Matt.
hey, and anybody that has a camera, feel free to turn on your camera. I don't care if you're sitting in your snuggie at home on the couch, feel free to turn on the camera. It's easier for me when I actually have faces to look at. It's hard enough online. And, if you're in your snuggie, that's fine. Fridays for me is a no tie day and it's a no shave day. And that goes back to my days as an OT. And when people ask what I am, I say I'm an OT. And when people ask what I do, then I sound pompous and say I run a hospital. But really, I identify as a therapist still, and that is largely due to the experiences I got at Temple twice. So I'll explain a little bit about myself and just my path. And with all the people on the call, obviously everybody's is going to be different. But I'll just talk a little bit about advanced degrees and professional growth for you. And then I'll actually turn it over to Abby and Michael, who have real knowledge to impart on you about the concrete steps. I do have an undergraduate degree in business with a concentration in marketing from Millersville University. Why I chose marketing? I come from small town, mid-central Pennsylvania. You either went to school for business, science, or teaching. I wasn't smart enough to go for science. I didn't think I really wanted to be a teacher, so I chose business. I chose a marketing track because when I was 18 years old, I thought that would be the easiest one to get through in 4 years. So working a couple years, I decided working in a cubicle, I was not going to be rich. And just briefly, and if you know exactly what you want to do for the next 40, 50 years of your life, you can click off now, wait for a couple minutes and let Abby and Mike talk to you. Everybody else, hopefully this resonates with somebody. If you asked me what I was going to do when I was 8 years old, I would have said a cowboy. If you asked me when I was 18, I would have said I'm going to be rich. At 22, 23, I think I want to be an OT. At over 50 right now, I don't know what I want to do 10 years from now. But I got to tell you, it's fun to try and figure it out. So the way it worked for me, went back to Temple, received, and I have 2 3/4 degrees. I have an undergrad in business. And then from Temple University, I have a certificate in partial fulfillment of a master's of science in occupational therapy. Try putting that on a resume. And then I also have an MBA, which I picked up while I was working at Temple. And the reason I have a certificate in OT, and I think this is important, to be in occupational therapy, and we're going back almost 30 years now, I didn't need a master's degree. I didn't need a doctorate. To do my basic job function, I needed a certificate in OT. The only difference that separated me from the people that got the MS in OT, the master's degree, was they spent another year doing a research project and presenting a thesis. I never had, nor do I have any desire ever to do research. It's just not my thing. It is for a lot of people, it's not mine. Definitely going on for a doctorate in OT where I could teach someplace. I didn't see myself in an academic setting. So I said to myself, what is going to make me grow in my profession as an OT? So I started working towards becoming a certified hand therapist. Went to an outpatient clinic, got some great experience, went back to Temple University. I was working there for a while. I left, I came back. And at that time, Temple was kind enough to have a very good reimbursement package. So I said, I'm going to pick up another degree. And everyone said, are you going to finally finish your master's? I said, no, I can be an OT for the next 50 years with what I have. I want to do something else. So I figured what would interest me. And I still had an interest in business. So I went to the MBA route, picked that up overnight. From there, I started working in management jobs, director of therapy. And from that point, I was working for some troubled hospitals. And what would happen is somebody would leave, a director or a manager would leave, and they'd say, hey, Matt, we need you to take over this department. Hey, Matt, we need you to take over that department. And I would take them over. And I think one lesson that I've learned along this journey is every time I was asked to take on an additional role, an executive had given me this advice: don't ask for more money. And I hear that frequently now. To grow in a profession, do it because you want to do it. The minute someone says, are you going to give me an extra $2,000 a year to take on this additional assignment? Or other people construe that to be, you're just doing it for the cash. Do it because you want to grow in your profession, and it will all kind of work out. So what happened for me is I took on additional roles. And at one point, someone said, hey, we can't have directors reporting to you. You're still a director yourself. Guess what? Your new title is Chief Operating Officer. I said, great. Does that one come a little bit more money? And they said, no. Think of it as a highly paid internship. So here I am, the lowest paid COO in the state of Pennsylvania, but I'm learning at a small hospital, Roxborough, learned every department. And then that led to another company recruiting me to come work for them. And then that led to that company saying, hey, you're doing an okay job. We'd like you to be a CEO at this other hospital. And from there, it just became, hey, we're going to give this guy that's an OT an opportunity to run hospitals. So for the past 10 years, I've been at some level, some executive level at numerous hospitals, all in the Philadelphia market. And that's kind of been my path. And what I would say to those of you on the call, and we only have a couple minutes, I'd say continue to grow for growth's sake. And if you want to pursue a degree, do something that's going to round you out as you. You know, 25 years ago when I started this in healthcare, we were using pen and paper for our notes. We didn't have an electronic medical record. Back then, physicians ran the hospitals. Now it's a lot of finance people run the hospitals. And this thing called COVID, 18 months ago, I didn't know what COVID was. And it's completely racked the healthcare world. And for people in this profession, when I say this profession, I don't mean OT, I mean healthcare. Think of it as a football team. There's 11 offensive positions, 11 defensive positions, but you're all football players. In healthcare, you need to know what your colleagues are doing in the department next to yours. That's the only way that you can really understand how this all works together outside of your little world. And if you want to be an OT or you want to be a PT or whatever your specialty is, and you know you want to work in that singular role for the next 40 years, then have at it. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong. But if you feel at some point you want to advance, then continue to learn just for learning's sake. And I'll say this, by no means, I'm not a dumb guy, but I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the room. And there's this Roman philosopher, I don't even know his name, but his quote is luck is nothing more than preparation meeting opportunity. And when you can take your experiences and your education and your core values and your goals, and those are going to change as circumstances change over the years. Those will change what your goals and expectations are. Being as well-rounded as you can will take you so far in life. And I don't know if anybody's in the second breakout session when John Kirby will talk about mentoring. He was a mentor of mine, and making those connections in the business community, but are huge, or in the healthcare community. So I'm up on my time. I know I had 7 minutes. So I'll turn it back to Samantha to introduce the next speaker. And I hope somebody, at least one person, got a little bit of value out of what I said. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Wow. I know I'm certainly taking plenty of notes. So we are really excited, and it looks like many of our students here are too. So thank you for taking the time to share a bit about your professional journey. And we really like what you said, especially about luck is where opportunity meets preparation. And I think that speaks to sort of why everyone's here today. And we're really excited about it. So thank you. Next, I'm really happy to turn it over to Mike and Abby, who will, now that we've heard kind of how education, where it fits in your professional world, we'll now think about the tips for selecting the right school and program, as well as navigating the graduate school application process. I also wanted to remind everyone we did have a little bit of time at the end built in for questions if you're interested. So if you have questions for Matt, feel free to start putting those in the chat. And if we go over a little bit on time, we have some time built out for that too. So thanks, Mike and Abby.
All right, thank you, Samantha. So I'm just going to share my screen here. This is the professor and me. We can't do anything without slides. So I'm just going to share this real quick. What Abby and I are going to do today, and I think Matt provided us with a great kind of foundation to talk about, how the rubber's going to meet the road here in terms of, all right, you need advanced education. What should that look like? And what are some things that you should consider? And so Abby and I are going to split this up. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about some major considerations that you should have in pursuing graduate school. And then Abby's going to talk a little bit about the actual application process. And so I think, again, Matt's presentation really provided us with a good way to consider this first slide. And it's actually almost like we planned it a little bit. But, in terms of considerations for graduate school, I think very often people are going to start talking about, I need an online program, or I need an online program. I need to consider what to do in terms of price. But really what we want to do is talk a little bit about kind of what's going to be expected from you in terms of your organization. All right, sorry about that. My computer was freezing a little bit. But, when we're thinking about graduate school, we're really thinking about where you are in your career. And everybody kind of has the same career continuum, regardless of kind of what field you're in. Whether every field that you're in is either going to have an entry level all the way through that C-suite. So kind of where Matt is right now in his career, looking at that C-suite, that chief operating officer, chief executive officer, but really thinking about kind of what is going to be expected of you in the workplace should kind of inform what kind of degree you're looking for. And so, when you're first coming out of, when you're first trying to get into a field or a career path, really in terms of what the workplace is going to be expecting of you, it's kind of technical mastery, right? And so even looking at kind of Matt's career to kind of get into healthcare as an occupational therapist, it's really about being a technical master. I know how to do occupational therapy. I know how to provide therapy to an individual. I know how to operate in this clinical setting. But as he advanced in his career, different things were being asked of him. Instead of just being an individual contributor, working with individual patients, as he grew in his career, the team's asking him to run a team. The organization's asking him to run a team. And so he starts needing to connect all the dots between seemingly disparate areas to execute on specific initiatives or in specific projects. And then, of course, as his career advanced, he's being asked then to, be a chief operating officer or run the facility from an operations perspective. And so that's going to require a lot of strategic decision making. And so I know this seems really conceptual and all of that, but where this is going to apply for somebody looking for grad school is start by thinking about what kind of program you need based on what's going to be expected of you in the workplace, right? So I'll give you kind of an example of what I'm talking about. If you're 22, 23 years old and you're saying, no, I want to go get an executive MBA because I want to be in the C-suite, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of places are going to be looking for a 22, 23-year-old to take on a role in the C-suite, right? So that executive MBA is maybe a little bit beyond what you need at this point in your career. And so thinking about where you are in your career should really inform what kind of degree you're going for and kind of what that degree is designed to do. So based on whether you're career pivoting or just trying to get into the field, do you need technical mastery, tactical expertise, or strategic decision making? The best way I like to think about this is when you're in the job, are you going to be expected to know the answer to the question, or are you going to be the person that needs to know what questions to ask? And so that's going to be a really big thing that should inform what kind of graduate degree you're looking for. So, again, we're talking about biggest things to consider. It shouldn't just be kind of program format. It shouldn't just be, program price. It should be really from a content standpoint, what is it that I need right now? The other thing that we would want a student to consider is timing, right? And it's always the question that you need to ask yourself. It's the right question to ask yourself before you certainly start submitting applications for graduate programs, but is it the right time for grad school? And I know having spent 10, 15 years working with graduate admissions and graduate recruiting, I know when we start asking these questions, a lot of these kinds of things come up. Well, I'm looking for a new job, or I might get a promotion, or I'm having a baby. I don't really know what I want to do with my career, or if I want to still work in this field. Do I still want to work at my current company? Or there's a lot going on right now. Things are going to calm down in 6 months and I'll do it then. Or I might be relocating. So the question really then becomes, is it ever the right time for grad school? And so the point I want to make on this slide is just making sure that you are taking things into consideration from a timing standpoint, but never confuse taking things into consideration for what could be just excuses. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, there's never going to be a perfect time to go to grad school. The stars are not going to align in any way where it's going to be super easy to pursue a graduate degree. Oftentimes you're going to be working while pursuing a graduate degree. You're going to have family, spouses, kids. You're going to have things going on at work. There's never going to be a perfect time. Certainly there are going to be times that are better than others, but we certainly don't want anybody to use anything up here necessarily as an excuse for kicking that can down the road. Oftentimes these are things that you can and should ask an admissions counselor as you're working through a graduate application. How flexible is the program? How many hours per week should I really reasonably be expected to set aside for homework in class? And let me figure out how I can make that work with my home and my job. But these are all things to keep in mind, because again, there's never going to be a perfect time, certainly, but there will be times that are better than others. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is one that's not usually always obvious to students as they start thinking about pursuing graduate education, and that's kind of the idea of thinking about your stakeholders. And so this, if you've taken any business courses, this might be something that looks really familiar. This is a very classic stakeholder analysis grid, basically trying to figure out how you're going to manage everybody that may or may not be involved on a project or a decision. And I actually like to use this in talking to students because I think this is a good grid you should jot out on a pad of paper to start thinking about who do I need to be talking to before I pull the trigger on this graduate degree? Because oftentimes, and I've seen this many, many times, the hardest part about starting grad school isn't always just getting in. It's getting the support you need and all the stakeholders in your life and your job to support you while you're doing this. And so that's a critical thing that people just too often assume they have, that everybody's just going to rally around them and support them to go to grad school. But that might be possible, but you'll need to have conversations to ensure that and actually manage this process. So again, a classic stakeholder analysis grid. You see the interest from low to high there on the vertical axis, and then influence in terms of how much influence the stakeholder might have in your decision or in your pursuit of the graduate degree from low to high. And so this is kind of where we break down what do we need to do and who do we need to talk to. I'll start here with those that have the highest amount of interest and potentially the highest amount of influence. Certainly conversations that you want to have with spouses or partners. Any graduate degree might be requiring you to carve out 10, 15 hours a week beyond just what's going on at home and beyond what's just going on at work. So spouses and partners could be really critical in this decision and your ability to get through. Supportive supervisors, I know that seems like a weird qualifier, but supportive supervisors, meaning supervisors that actually want you to get this done. You'll want to manage them because they have a high level of interest. They have a lot of influence in the kind of degree that you can and should be getting. And also your mentors, any mentors that you have professionally, kind of talking through what this graduate degree experience is going to look like. Those that have really high interest, but maybe not a lot of influence in terms of your graduate education might be your parents. Certainly if you still live at home, they might still be supporting you in some ways financially, or maybe they're just helping you in terms of housing. But having these conversations if your parents have a high degree of interest and some influence. Team members or anybody that's directly reporting to you in your job. These are conversations you might have like, hey, I have to hop on to a project meeting during my lunch break, so that's why my door's closed, those types of things. Having conversations with roommates, certainly if you live with people in a roommate situation, if you're going to be going to class or you're going to have to be doing a lot of things at the house, these are conversations that you want to have prior to applying and starting that graduate degree, just to make sure that it's a good experience. Those with a lot of influence, but maybe not a lot of interest, this is always kind of an interesting group of people. You know, supervisors. So if you're in an entry-level job, your boss's boss might have a high degree of influence because they're your boss's boss, but they probably don't care a lot about you pursuing a graduate degree, but you know, still somebody to manage and maybe have a conversation with. If you have children, this is certainly something that you want to talk to them about as well. Again, a lot of influence because you have to manage your children, take care of your kids, but they don't necessarily have a lot of interest all the time if you're going to grad school. So again, thinking about these conversations. And our last group here, those with really low interest and low influence, but maybe you still have to talk to them. Coworkers, certainly coworkers in other teams, anybody that you work with directly on a daily basis, acquaintances, you know, people that are just going to ask, hey, what are you doing with your grad degree? You know, there's still stakeholders in your life, and conversation certainly might need to be had. So again, a classically oriented stakeholder analysis grid, but even if you don't use the grid, I think it's just important to remember, as before you begin the actual process, really lining up your stakeholders, really lining up your support for pursuing a graduate degree, I think is going to be really critical in your success in the graduate degree. So in terms of things to consider, just thinking about that entry level, you know, technical mastery, tactical mastery, strategic decision making, certainly timing, and these stakeholders. The last thing I'll say, and Matt actually kind of opened up his part of the presentation with this, was simply to say, hey, if you know exactly what you want to do, you know, just pop in and talk to Mike and Abby about this. And I will say, to wrap up kind of what to consider for grad school. Grad school is very much a very focused endeavor. And so I'm glad Matt kind of teased that a little bit, because graduate school is really about you've discovered exactly what you want to do. As I always tell students, as we talk about grad school, one of my first questions is, why are you pursuing a graduate degree? Why do you think you need a graduate degree? And if there isn't a good answer there, I'm going to be very candid with the student to say, you know, it doesn't sound like you know what you want to do. And I will tell them that there are actually way easier and less expensive ways to explore different fields than going to get a graduate degree. Graduate degree is expensive. Graduate degrees are hard. They're challenging. And so the only way, and they're certainly not long enough for you to kind of taste everything like you may have in undergrad. You know, an undergrad degree is 4 years. You can kind of try everything on, dip your toe in the water and a lot of different things. But with graduate school, we might have you for a year, maybe 2 years. That's not enough time to kind of figure things out or discover yourself in a lot of ways. Not to say that there's not going to be a lot of self-discovery in a graduate degree, but it is a very focused, very kind of tight rope walk when we talk about pursuing that graduate degree. So all things to consider, and I hope any of this or all of this hopefully was useful as you think about preparing to apply and search for graduate degrees. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Abby Shepard, who's actually going to talk about the actual graduate applications then and some things that you want to consider about getting together as you prepare for that. And Abby, I'll just advance your slides if you want to just give me a heads up. So thank you all.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. So Mike spent a lot of time kind of focusing on some of these kind of broader considerations, right? And Matt provided a really wonderful case study of someone's example kind of through the education system, through graduate school, and also their career. So what I want to do is kind of get pretty nitty gritty here. I realize that many of you on the webinar today might actually be at the point where you are starting to do your graduate school research. So perfect. We'll start with some general guidelines kind of for your search. Again, some of these might seem a little obvious, but I think as I think Mike teased a little bit here, when you're considering all of these different factors, there's a lot up in the air that you're kind of considering, right? So I do think it's really important to start your search early. Every single graduate program, different schools are going to have different deadlines, potentially multiple intakes, and you want to definitely make sure to give yourself enough time to prepare your application ahead of that deadline. and kind of work backwards from there to figure out, when you might need to, do certain things for the application, or maybe when you need to reach out to an admissions officer, right? That's my second tip here. And maybe it's a little bit biased, right? I've worked in graduate admissions for a long time, and a lot of what I personally enjoy doing is working with students. But I think you'll find as you're doing your research, most university and program websites are going to provide some basic information, but where you're really going to get into the nitty gritty, the mission of the different institutions that you're applying to, what makes one MPH program different from another, is in those one-on-one conversations. I know here at the College of Public Health, we take a very counseling-based approach to admissions. And we meet with students to go over their background, to go over things like their resume and their transcripts, and really providing the support so that a student can really submit the strongest application possible. We know that that's not always necessarily available to everyone for those one-on-one appointments, but you can really find out a lot more about different programs by signing up for admissions related events, right? These events typically, especially now with COVID, are online, they're pretty accessible, and they vary quite a bit, right? From just general overviews of a program to sample classes. And they really give you a lot of wonderful information about the programs that then you can kind of take with you and use in your application. And finally, you do want to cater your application to every school that you're applying to. Again, this might seem very straightforward, but as someone who's worked in graduate admissions for quite a while, it is very easy to spot when a student writes, kind of a general essay and then they just switch out the name of the school. You really want to make sure to kind of include that detail, right? And really take the time to cater parts of your application to each program that you're looking at. So the last thing and I'm wrapping up a little quickly because I know we're running out of time here a bit, but I do want to give some general application tips. So most applications, right, are going to, into any program that you might be looking at, are going to have kind of the same or similar features to them, right? Letters of rec, essays, transcripts. These aren't going to really change program to program. But I think the way that students approach these sections can optimize their application. And what I mean by that is kind of in my first example here for letters of recommendation. We see all the time kind of generic letters of recommendation coming through. And so it's very obvious to us that a student may not have necessarily had an in-depth conversation with their recommender. And what I mean by this is typically, if you're going to ask someone to write a letter of recommendation for you and they say yes, it's probably going to be a good letter of rec, right? 9 times out of 10, the letters of rec that we get are positive. Where I think a lot of times students might miss an opportunity is, when you're thinking about your recommendations, right? Why are you asking this person, right? What skills do you want them to talk about that you definitely want included in your application, right? If you're talking to a faculty member, maybe there's a project that you did that really, enhanced your writing ability or set you on the path to pursue an MSW, right? We want that to be in those letters of recommendation. The more detailed, the better, right? When looking at essays or personal statements, I think, again, the more detailed and the more it's obvious that a student has done their research and has tailored the essay or the personal statement to that institution, the better. A lot of times, in admissions, we talk about, reviewing students and making sure that we're a good fit for them. And the essay is really the chance for us to kind of get a little bit more information about you from your own words. Standardized tests, I'll touch on very briefly. Some programs require things like the GRE, some don't. I always tell students that if you're applying to a program that does require the GRE, to make sure to utilize some of the free resources that are online through ETS, which is the organization that administers that exam. Take time practice exams. I know they're scary to do because that score that you get might not be what you want, but you can use that to then kind of prepare. I know it looks like we're running out of time here. I guess I'll just leave it out. I'm sorry I went over a little bit, Sam. I guess if anyone has specific questions, I know myself and Mike are always available to kind of answer those.
And thank you so much. We will also be we've recorded this and we'll provide all of this information to everyone who is able to attend and anyone who couldn't attend, but that hope to attend and get this information as well. This has been so informative, and I think, that's the challenge of wanting to provide so much resource to our students. So thank you so much to all of our speakers as we've gone through career paths, what the graduate education process might look like, and as well as those practical tips for getting started. So I want to thank you all so much.